Wait, it should be streaming now, so you should be good to go.
Need to hit anything?
I don't think so. As long as you've got volume and whatnot, you're good.
Okay. All right. I will call to order this meeting of the Wabash Township Board. It is October 7th at 7:02 p.m. Roll call.
Jeremy Harris present.
Ian Pitlar is present.
David J. Board member.
Also present.
Awesome.
All rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, all right. Agendas and meeting minutes. Anybody have an issue with anything that is on the agenda as proposed? Okay. Any issues with the meeting minutes? I read through them. They said. All right. Then motion to vote on approval of meeting minutes for both August 20th and September 2nd, 2025.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Would either of you like to give an update? I know we have a lot of budget items. If you have a short update, that's fine.
I don't have much of an update other than I was just going to give you run numbers, just kind of an update on that.
Sure.
Other than, oh, sure. So today we hit 1,379 runs. This time last year we were at 1134. 23 we were at 966, and 22 we were at 926. So we've grown quite a bit. We just added a big group of new volunteers to our roster. For the first time ever, our roster is at 49 people, so paid and volunteered together. So we've got a lot of work to do with a lot of new folks, but we're growing pretty quickly. So
Awesome.
And that's all I've got.
Question. So what do you attribute the rise in the number of applicants to?
A lot of it is we've gotten quite a few referrals from Purdue, because Purdue's doing their student EMT program over there that helps with fire, or helps with sports and athletic events, whatever that be. Some of them have come over from there. We've also got quite a turnout just from the community in general that aren't affiliated with Purdue. So some of it has just been, Facebook posts, stuff like that, but we haven't really done a big drive per se for volunteers, but we end up like this group we just brought on. There's 8 new people in this most recent group. And I think the longest application in that group that we had held waiting for a process was less than a month. So, I mean, they've all kind of come in pretty recently. So I mean, it's pushing us to the place that we're starting to get thin on gear and extra equipment for people and stuff like that. But,
Infrastructure to
house that growth in your volunteers.
we're getting there. We're starting to, we know when we started to run out of space, and we start running out of wall lockers for people to put gear in, and then the gear rack upstairs, it's got all the extra stuff, starts to get a little thin. We're getting to that place right now. So, but I think we're okay. I mean, with this group we've got, we're in good shape, but we like keeping some extra gear upstairs for any of our staff, volunteer or paid, that goes on a fire. So they've got the ability to come out of the stuff they have, get into an extra set while their stuff's getting washed, so they're not wearing that around them. So, but we're in pretty good shape.
My perspective would be that because of the growth of the professional training and perspective that Wabash Fire Department has, you're going to get more referrals because they're comfortable doing it.
Yes, we get them from all over too. I mean, we've got people from other areas that recommend people here, from past members to current staff members. So, I mean, it definitely makes a difference that when they come in and they're ready to apply, that we grab a hold of them during that time that they've got an interest. Having people wait when they're a volunteer really just zaps that. So when you get a hold of them 3 or 4 months later, they've got other stuff that they found to fill their time with. So, but it's good. Trevor Doyle, Captain Doyle's got his hands full right now going through your classes. So that's a good problem to have.
That wasn't happening 5 years ago.
That's exactly
I
right.
was gonna say it's stability. Nobody wants to volunteer for anything if they think the organization they're going for is unstable or gonna change rapidly, or the work isn't gonna be valued.
For sure.
Having that stability at the top.
I did
think
want to,
it's-
I wanted to add some things as to highlight the same thing that you guys were mentioning there. We just had the open house this weekend, and we had a volunteer. We have a volunteer whose whole family have been volunteer firefighters up north near Maryville. And she is a Purdue student right now. She's done a lot of work, and you've probably seen her highlighted in a few Facebook posts if you've seen it. She's very active on the EMS side, particularly, but not exclusively. We just, her sister who's in high school was here, as was her dad, who's a captain up there in a volunteer department. And her sister was like, "Well, I'm hoping here to be with you guys in a few years." So you're already talking about, again, keeping those core volunteers. I think it's also, I think that part of what we're also seeing is with our increase in ambulance staffing, et cetera, EMS, you've seen a few referrals and people that are coming in specifically because they're interested on the EMS side of the industry.
I have to say something about your open house. I come in periodically and I kind of look around, look at the equipment, make sure everybody's fine. How you doing? I know. So I had 2 funerals Sunday, and I came in about 10 o'clock and just said, "Hey, you guys are going to do great. Good luck." And when I saw everything out there, and I walked in tonight, I thought, this looks like a really top-notch professional station. The equipment just screams we're on top of it. So whatever you guys have done, thank you.
It was very, very well attended, as was the 9/11 memorial that Frank and Joe worked on. I think it's a lot of times when you just open things up for the public to just come, you just never know what's going to happen. And I was previously committed on Sunday, but I had, a half hour that I could swing over it. It was pretty awesome cresting the hill up here and seeing the whole back lot full of cars. And I said that to the guys when I came inside, and they said, but it's just been like that since the beginning. Like, a big group of people are here. They all cycle out, and the lot hasn't gone down. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And people got to see them cut on cars. They got to see the equipment, and it wasn't just a kid event. That's what was cool about it. Was adults were equally engaged and interested in the process. So asking a lot of very good questions. So it was great.
My update, I'm focused really. This has been an interesting month as we've gone through the budget and all that. Just a quick update on township assistance. We have seen probably we're on pace for about $130,000 this year or so. So through September 30th, we have provided $88,800 in assistance versus $79,000 last year. And I can get you these because I didn't have the time to get you guys a more detailed report of the rest of it. Now, I will note denials are up compared to previous years. I think that people are applying for more stuff and we're not able to help with as much. You're also seeing more folks that are above our income standards applying and being ineligible at the moment. It's just, it's the same thing that we're seeing at other places. And I've kept harping on that. We've seen a massive increase in the number of utility bills coming through, especially Duke Energy. That's been big. This last month, we probably did $3,000 in assistance roughly in Duke Energy. And just exclusively that. Traditionally, we've seen a lot more, very little utility assistance as a primary concern, more housing assistance as a primary concern. That tracks also with what we've seen in other agencies. I know that at LUM, we've had 5 consecutive months of highest record compared to previous years. So it's been tough, and our staff is feeling it a little bit. We've also had, so that's the big piece. We did have some staff turnover, so we are going to be starting the process for hiring a new township administrator. We had her employee step aside. And we also had a change. We're going to go towards a full-time MIH director position here in the coming months. That's been part of why I've held back on
presenting that or resolution for salary piece because we're moving to change the structure a little bit of it. Other than that, I'm trying to think. Oh, we had the ITA conference this month. We had, it was it was actually really useful. There were a lot of conversations ongoing about funding and other pieces. Also township assistants, both myself and Catherine, our township assistance coordinator, went down there. We kind of split up the different pieces of, fire protection, cemetery, fence disputes, which I've never had to do, and I hope I never have to do after seeing that presentation. Good news is it only applies to land bordering an agricultural area. So I don't foresee a lot of grumpy neighbors arguing between themselves about a fence and the agricultural side of the township. So other than that, we've had a few more weed, like detrimental plant and weed removal pieces. Those are about to get sent out to the auditor to get placed as liens due to non-payment. That's standard process, and we'll get it whenever they pay their taxes or it goes to tax sale. That is all I have. Am I missing something? Oh, the bollards got hit already, and one of them got knocked down. So we had a staff member's daughter was there and saw it happen. Just a truck making the turn. It still stood up, so it's not fully fallen down. Frankly, I hope it caused a little damage, but but doesn't seem to be stopping them. So we're still hoping to have the more permanent barriers, but.
Right. So I doubt if they're gonna do that and call that construction.
I know, yeah.
That was probably one of the least expensive options they had available.
Yeah, so, and those got, again, and it's the same ongoing thing. It's just kind of ridiculous, but
At least now there's two sets of bollards.
There's two sets of bollards.
There's two sets now.
Yeah.
So.
Just, anyway.
Crazy.
And I did see you guys doing a burn yesterday.
Up at the cemetery?
Yeah.
That's gonna end up being something else that we end up having to talk about as we burn through the pile. There's a whole lot of other people's stuff in that pile. We found some drug paraphernalia in the pile. We found all kinds of stuff up there. So I think I'm gonna secure a couple trail cams, put up some trees out there to see if we can figure out who's throwing. I mean, I went up there last Thursday and built the pile up because there were all kinds of piles spread around. I built it all up, and just from then until we went and burned it, somebody else had brought a bunch of trash up and threw it in piles. So, so we'll find out who it is, and we'll have the sheriff's office talk to them, and they'll take care of their own stuff. So,
I would note we had a tree down in Sandridge. Our vendor the vendor that does mowing notified us. He quoted us for chopping it down and removing it. It wasn't like, it was limbs and whatnot, but that's been taken care of, or is in the process of getting taken care of. I haven't reviewed it, but I approved it last week, and he's usually pretty quick and responsive about that. So,
and all that ground surrounding that is not all about pyramid.
Yes, a lot of it around. Yeah,
So
we were just talking about that.
So they're going to be,
Yeah,
they'll be watchful neighbors.
yeah.
it'll be interesting.
I only have one question, which is just with the increase in requests, is there anything on the process or admin side that is, I don't know how much time it takes to process one of these, but especially if we're getting more that are not eligible for getting money from us anyway, like, is there anything in that process that's taking a while that we can speed the gears on, or are you feeling like you got it?
Honestly, they're working their butts off to do that. I actually, and this will overlap, so you'll probably hear part of this in the budget presentation. As we've been going through and looking for next year, I asked our staff members to track their time just to see how much they were spending on different pieces of the assistance process. Our primary staff person has been spending 22 hours a week on township assistance and not getting everything done. We have our intern who is actually, this is their last week. They're finishing high school and they want to make sure that they finish on good foot before they go to Purdue. They were quite bummed actually. So that she cried when she let me know that she wasn't going to be able to continue. But she's been doing amazing work. She was tracking her time too, and it was about 9.5 hours that she's been putting on top of that in township assistance. So right now, and you know, they're doing it as bare bones as possible. Part of what I'll talk about during the budget presentation is the desire to also go to a full-time township assistance person. We're already at 30 hours and we're not even doing as good a job as we should, or as we'd like to. It's not as we should, but as we'd like to be able to help also connect people to other resources, to invest in working with other agencies in partnership and trying to be, you know, there's ongoing work with different coalitions, et cetera, of organizations. So that's part of what we're hoping to do in this piece here. So you'll see that in the presentation, but it's just nonstop. Today, she told me she was waiting on 8 people to send in their financial documents as part of the application process. Folks have to send in their finances for the last month, the last 30 days. So any bank accounts, Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, you name it, credit cards, all of that. And she's got 8 people that have submitted everything else, and we'll come back for that, plus whoever comes in next. So it's just and
we're spending time reaching out to them for that instead of making like a list that they gotta.
We did. Oh, they have a list. It's part of assistance world. You make the list and you do all of that, and some applicants are going to be better about bringing everything all at once. Some are not, and so we've got a strong process. Like the statute says, you have 72 hours, and that means also you have to, if you submit an application and documentation is not ready for us to review within those 72 hours, that's a denial. So that's part of what's increased also the number of denials, people that haven't gone through, but it's just statutory processes. We are trying to make it as easy as possible. That laptop that you guys have there is the one that's available for clients to be able to log on and download documentation and send it to us here in the office. So it's just part of the assistance world. It's just how it always goes. So
okay. I'd love to have a conversation about that at some point, because I think my gut tells me there is fat to cut that we.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Before we add FTE to the situation. Okay. I've worked at Purdue long enough to know that I don't always want to throw a body at the problem.
Oh, I understand.
But we can discuss more later. I want to get to the business.
Yes.
So, opportunity for public comment.
Just 2 things. I just want to thank the township and everyone who helped make the 9/11 memorial service successful community event. It was well attended and I think well received. Also, I attended the Sunday open house, my wife and our 2 very young grandchildren, and it was a great family event and very well organized and run. They had a good time, even though my 4-year-old grandson is very shy. Some of the staff convinced him to go up into the truck, which is a big thing for him. Awesome. So, and I think that he went into like the little trucks inside the ambulance and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Should I assume that this resolution will remain tabled until?
Yeah, I changed it to the 21st.
Okay.
Do you want to flip 2 and 1 just to knock that out of the way and then just show them?
Sure. Motion to establish an ad hoc committee to be composed of the township trustee, the board president, fire chief, and the owner's representative for review of BOT qualification process.
Yes.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. Self-explanatory, I think.
So this is just for reviewing this.
Yes, which are expected to, the deadline is next Wednesday, if my memory serves me right. So we have about 6 or 7 days if we want to try to get it to, but we'll be able to share it and whatnot. But we just wanted to make sure that there was board representation in that process and not just ourselves. So, okay.
Acronyms for your BOT.
Build, operate, transfer, and request for qualifications. I can, yeah.
I forgot BOT. In my world, BOT is board of trustees.
Oh, that's true.
BOT time. Anybody have any issues with that? If they prefer to be on it, that's fine. All right, I will make the motion as written.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next order of business is our main order of business today is budget proposal presentation.
Yes.
So I will vote to open a public hearing on the budget proposal presentation. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let me go here so that I can make sure that it's streaming at least the presentation. Or do you want to set it? It's in the other one where there, then share. Should be able to share the whole window where the other one is.
This guy? No, text me.
That's the option. And then I will open up and then go to Wabash. My presentation is the link. It's at the bottom of the top thing on the website. Oh. That looks. All right. Oh, it's not the same shape. Let's see. And under document links, it's right below the presentation. Yeah, and you can do slideshow, and I'll turn up the thing over here. Is it okay if I turn off the so that you guys can see it? Again, I'd love to have a display instead. Eventually. Okay. So let's see here. So for the budget presentation, and you guys have also the line item budget estimate. So that is the one that's landscape shaped. So this is just our proposal for last couple of years for this upcoming year. So let's start with the civil funds overview. And I know that there will be quite a bit of pieces. So just interrupt me if you have questions so that we don't wait till the end. For civil fund overview, we talked about dropping the levy to 0 to try to be able to reset it, which has been the advice of the ITA's attorney. Our CPA is also comfortable with that, as are we here. It's not, the LGF will then determine that new levy under that process. But we think we have a really strong case for a significant increase so that we are able to improve our long-term financial stability on the township trustee side of the operation. Like I mentioned, we had part of what this proposal has is increasing township assistance caseworker to 1 full person. And it would also allow for the absorbing of the mobile integrated health staff into the general fund after the conclusion of the grant period, which is at the end of June next year. It has a small amount of money for nonprofit agreements. I know that we'd seen Homestead Resources come in, and so that's the major piece of it. So it's like $15,000 in nonprofit agreement. And then for this year, township assistance would be paid from the general fund as we're going through this mechanism. And we would increase the budget for township assistance from 142 to 172. So that's just the rough overview there. On the fire funds, this is where the fun happens. So this is the last year, I think we've mentioned it a couple of times. This is the last year that we're able to do what's called an excess levy appeal. After this year, the tool is going away as a result of Senate Bill 1. And so our CPA recommended that we go through and carry out an excess levy appeal this year. I just wanted to take a second, and I expect questions here. Don't hesitate to ask questions on this one because this is the big piece of it. Tax implications for homeowners. It would not increase the taxes that any individual homeowner pays. It would, however, shift the allocation of the collected tax revenues towards our unit for the for homeowners. It does increase taxes on 2% and 3% cap properties, so industrial, agricultural, apartment units, but not homeowners. So if you're familiar with I know that I've talked about it in the past, but it's always a little bit wonky. We have circuit breaker under Indiana state constitution. It's limited to 1% of the certified net assessed value of homes that are, primary residences, 2% of agricultural and apartment units, and 3% of industrial. We're on our unincorporated part of the township is on the lower side across the whole county anyway. Last year, we were sitting at about 1.55%. This excess levy appeal is reviewed by the Department of Local Government Finance. It is not guaranteed to be awarded in its entirety or at all. So we have to submit, our deadline for submission is the same date as our adoption meeting. And so we've been working with our CPA to complete that. What this would do is allow our department to increase staffing from 4 shift employees to 10 shift employees. So it would allow us to go to operating 2 crews. When we're talking about cross staffing, I guess I'll leave it there. I have a little bit more of a description of that later, but then also, so it would be a combination of fire and EMS personnel as we're adding ambulance service onto the equation. The other piece is the overview of it is increased debt service. So the debt service fund would increase. The biggest chunk of it, as you guys are aware of, is that we requested public safety lit for some of our capital expenses that we needed to undertake. Without receiving it, we have to pay for them somewhere. So this is for radio equipment, air pack system, and then as part of the process that we've outlined, the second ambulance, which even if we had right now, the same staff we had right now, we'd eventually anyway want a second ambulance to have as a backup. And so then on the Cume Fire side, however, we are actually reducing the budget, not the revenue, but the budget to allow for increasing savings for future down payments and debt structuring as part of our long-term planning for the unit, for our 10-year plan of expected debt servicing and whatnot and capital outlays. So that's our overview. I'm going to get in more detail here in the general fund. On the personnel side, would have the township trustee going from the half-time position to the full-time position. As you guys approved, now the salary you guys haven't approved, but that's draft, 43 to 76,875. We have the township administrator doing a cost of living adjustment on it. We actually, if I can talk here for a sec, although we haven't finalized, although we're still in the budget process, I will note that a potential conversation that we've had is for some of the pieces that the township, that the fire department assistant has been ongoing, could get absorbed in the, at least for a year or two by the township administrator. So moving that expense fully to the general fund. That's just Catherine's already, that's part of what she's already doing, and it's a possibility. It's not anything that's been finalized, but so right now it's in both funds there, but it's just one piece that we have. Like I mentioned, trying to take the township assistance coordinator or caseworker full time, and then reducing the part-time staff and interns line item. It's currently just the intern line item, but I'm changing it to part-time / intern, to reducing it to 8,000. Now that is based on the notion of going to a full-time person on the township assistance. We would expect to need less additional support for that position in the immediate future. The MIH staff, and Ed made a good point when we were talking about this earlier. You'll see that in the 9501, one of the grant funds, There's a specific line item for the MIH director, and then in the general fund, there isn't. It's just, I left it broad in the general fund so that we are able to adjust that salary and with the part-time staff pieces here in the future. So I have it bunched up into one bucket. And we would make that position a perf position so that they have retirement benefits. I'll stop there just before we jump onto fire funds. That's the major change that really in the general fund. So
Can I ask a question?
yes, sir.
Did you say that our current township administrator is Amy?
Yes,
She's leaving?
she left here at the beginning of September. Or yes, beginning of September. So
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question is the township assistance coordinator, caseworker, obviously we need somebody there full time. So it's not drawing effort from the other work. I'm assuming that if that person has the time, they can do other work besides.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've been talking a little bit about this in the office here in the last month or two. We'd like to be able to, if we do that, there would be 3 full-time people, right, in the office. And what this allows is for the township administrator to go up to the town to carry responsibility of the township trustee, like if I'm on vacation or if I'm at the state house or other pieces. There's obviously not the political and major decision making, but there's some of these responsibilities on the day-to-day operation that they'd be able to take over if I'm not in the office at that moment. Similarly, we would also expect that township administrator to be able to go down, if you will, to the township assistance position to be able to cover and assist in times when we have a higher demand. And then same thing for the township assistance coordinator. They would be cross-staffed with the township administrator to be able to carry some of those pieces that are daily stuff like finances, data entry, accounting, those pieces. And so that's part of what we've been trying to set up that process to do. If you go into our office, there's a wall full of sticky notes with, the door full of sticky notes with all of the responsibilities and pieces that the jobs entail to be able to shift them around. So yeah, does that answer?
The other question I have is there a process? I mean, you've had a massive increase in township assistance requests and funding.
Mhm.
I don't have the numbers in front of you for the change over the last 2 years, but do you believe that your current process is streamlined enough that you don't have to take a staff member's time to do something that the applicant should?
It is streamlined enough that that's the case. I think that what we are just facing at I think I get what you're asking. If I'm not answering your question, let me know. We've made it so that it's as streamlined as possible so that the person in the office isn't having to do the things that the applicant should be doing.
That's my question.
Now, we have a list and we have an application list that's on our website. We have the application list, the documents and everything get provided to the applicants. We tell people that they need to have those before they come into the office for an appointment.
Yep.
We have all of those things. But the rubber meets the road, and we have folks that come in that don't have reliable transportation, that might not have all the documents, for example. And at that point, it's, staff member will try to work with that person.
To stop you there. What has transportation got to do with filling out the documents?
No, it's what I meant was they've already come in. They don't have reliable transportation. If we were to turn them away and tell them you're missing this one document, then it's
Frankly, I don't think that's their problem.
Especially today,
I cannot accept the fact that somebody gets here and they want to use money, rightfully so, if they earn it and they need it. I'm all for voting that. I think you guys are doing a tremendous job, but I don't think it's our office to do their job for them and say, well, I couldn't find transportation. That's just too bad.
no. I think what I meant to say was not.
I mean to say it should be their opportunity to fill those things out and do it because it's taking staff time in there.
Yeah, and that's part of why we have No, yeah.
I mean, I was gonna ask the same question.
No, I mean, I think part of what we're trying to do, and also you'll see that in the new building specifically. Right now, we have a space for people to be able to pull up documents. That's what, like I mentioned, that computer's there. We tell people, do it, and like, you can log in, send it to us, and then we'll see you, like, and so depending on the situation, we do that. But there are also cases where it's a little bit more challenging. We have folks that are
Technology challenges.
both technologically challenged. It's fair to say developmentally challenged to some extent sometimes.
I'm gonna say it for him. There's a whole lot of time that his staff spends helping people complete the paperwork because they struggle to understand the process. So there's just, no matter how many times you say, do this, they just need handheld walk through a lot of that process.
So part of it, with that being said, I was kind of in that way, is the process too complicated?
Absolutely. We've been told a gazillion times that there's a shorter application coming. But it's a state, that's a state mandated, application form. We think that they're really close because they presented it at ITA and everybody literally raised their hand. And it's like, what are you showing us? And they're like, oh, this is the updated application form. It's like, that's not anywhere. So up to this moment, we're still working on the old application.
So you believe the new application process will be advantageous to the applicants?
Yes,
And the
because,
staff?
yeah, so I think part of what Ed was referencing there, our application, which is state mandated, is 10 pages of paperwork that you have to fill out, which include like your finances and things that are duplicated by the documents that you're collecting. So honestly, in a lot of cases, we tell people to skip parts of the application because the other document they're giving us
I was gonna
suffices.
ask, how much flexibility do we have to
Uh,
edit this process in ways that are still legally valid, but
Some,
reduce
but
this administration time?
but it's,
How much is this, would this cost us to go from halftime to full time?
the going from halftime to full time would be,
It's not listed.
so let me pull it up here. I had it,
And it's
without the COLA, it's about 24,000 or so is the difference between, because the full-time person would be 50,000, the half-time person is 24.
Well, and are we paying, if they become full time, are we doing healthcare and?
Well, yes. And then, so that would be 24 plus,
Probably.
10, and then 24 times plus 3,000. So 27, 37 total is the cost.
37. So what's our 2.5 COLA increase on firefighters cost us?
The 2.5, let me pull it up here because I don't have it as a note there. If you were to look at today, and I'm going to pull this up here. So we are doing, let me tell you, I apologize. I have like 1,000 pages open here. So our COLA is costing us 1,300 plus the increase in per employee, per member of the fire department, roughly. So it would be, did I get that right? Me. I actually don't think I have that right. It is, excuse me, 1,600 plus the related increase in pension, per staff member is the estimate.
Is that including adding the fire marshal position?
No. So that's just the COLA cost for.
So it's 1,600, so what's the total on it? Is what I'm getting. How many firefighters we got there getting that?
If assuming everything went through, it would be $39,000.
Okay, that worked out beautifully for the purposes of the example.
I see what you were doing there. Yeah.
But like, what I'm saying is like, 2.5 is a small cost of living increase when inflation's the way it is right now. And like, personally, I despise government inefficiency with all my bones. So I would rather find a way to make the process faster and not just throw money at the problem and give our firefighters a better cost of living increase that they've already earned, if we can do that for the same amount of money.
It's only tough in that, I mean, I hear it and I can, we don't have to, we actually
We're
part
not
of the,
voting today, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just a discussion.
Yeah,
Like, that's
part of
what
the beauty of it actually is, we don't have to do it immediately, or we can relook at it in mid-year because our revenue stream for the general fund won't change because it's all.
And this is all especially in light of what you just told us of, it's gonna get easier in the future. And
I'm hoping.
headcount is unbelievably difficult to get rid of once you've added it.
That's fair. So I would probably say, the part that I will note is that it's harder on the sense of like moving it over to the fire fund, just because this comes out of general fund, the other part comes out of the firefighting fund. But I'm open to actually talking about a higher cost of living adjustment. I actually, when I go into the fire fund, I can talk a little bit about how, even though it's not in the presentation, about where we could do it from. So
Sure.
so I will.
I think our concerns on this side are specific and noted. So why don't we move on to the fire budget, because that's 95% of the game. Dollar expense.
I'm sorry. Question mark?
No, that's fair.
Turns out sticking people on the ground doesn't cost that.
No.
Keeping them out of there does.
Yes. So personnel, right now, we've done the 2.5% COLA is what's reflected on this. If the excess levy were to be fully approved, and I'm saying if, again, we have to, I just want to take a sec here. Part of the caveat is that this is the last year that we can do it. Can only do it once, really, for the type of thing that we're doing. And they look at the average of the expenses over the next 5 years. If you want to maximize what you're trying to get from that, the best way to do that is to full step it in this particular scenario, which is not usually what my modus operandi is.
Okay. That explains one of my big questions.
Yes. This would do increasing the shift staffing from 4 to 10 firefighters or fire EMS staff members. Without it, our target would be to go from 4 to 6. Now, caveat to that, we still have been applying for safer grants and other pieces that if we got those, it would enable us to move faster than what even our predicted plan had been. What this does, and I'll spend a little bit of time here, what our excess levy appeal would look at is our extension of service into ambulance operations. So if you're seeing they're going from 4 to 10, that allows us to still have a full crew of 4 on a truck and be able to simultaneously have 3 ambulances in operation. What that means for us is we expect that as we're adding more ambulance service, we will get called outside of our service area. Now, there's a benefit to that from the township's financial position, right? That's not the reason why we're doing it, the primary reason, but ambulance service collects revenue from billing. And so as we go through this process, if we're, for example, providing ambulance service and responding in Shelby Township or parts of the city, because we're getting called into the city to do these runs, or our growing area, in 5 years, our run volume will be 30–50% higher, right? On medical calls, even in our outside of city limit service area. All of this both allows us to have more ambulances available, which also increases our revenue and funding for our department, but also allows us to do cross-staffing. So the part of the cross-staffing piece, this would build in, and I wouldn't call it baby step because it's not a baby step, but it would lockstep with our future expansion into a second a second station, right? A second staff station. As we go and add more personnel, these are folks that would eventually, I call it mitosis, right? Like you grow the cell and then you split it up into two different pieces. And that's part of what this would allow us to do without having to be dependent on a legislative solution. Now, we're still shooting for a legislative solution for our long-term challenges, but this makes it so that we have less of a major bridge to jump on the legislative side. So that's part of it.
So what would be those legislative
Solutions. Part of what we've been discussing, we had a meeting with Chairman Thompson of House Ways and Means. Part of what some townships and units, not just townships, have gone and done essentially they've gotten special legislation introduced, which allows them to reset their levy. So let's say our levy right now currently is 2 million. If we're talking about the long term with the growth and all of those pieces, it probably needs to be closer to 6 million as a whole, like just our service area. I know it's a massive number, but it's not that massive in reality. But that would be what our long-term levy is roughly. I don't have like the full calculation in front of me. So instead of making it so that we're sweating everything, having to do the 10-year appeal in 5 years and in 7 years and be struggling until then, this would allow us to reset the levy, like the legislative solution, without having to immediately establish a budget that has that full amount. That's the legislative solution. And we're still shooting for pieces of that legislative solution. Even if we did this doesn't get us all the way where we need to be by mid-2030s. So it's a conjunction, it's a step in the process, or would be a step in the process, but it also would make it so that if we can't hammer out a legislative solution, we're not stuck at 6 staff members as our township continues to increase. So that's just the quick and dirty of it.
So the good explanation, and I totally understand the planning for the future concept, as we're all have asked numerous times, just let's not worry about today, let's worry about 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
To me, the most important adjective or verb or whatever those things are is the word if. Excess levy. And it seems like a lot of this is riding on
If.
the hope that goes through, and my concern would be, but if it doesn't.
So there is a second budget proposal. This has made part of the reason why this budget season has been so fun.
This is the Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny budget is coming along.
So but the Santa Claus and Easter Bunny budget is the one that we have to adopt to be able to go through the DLGF process. But if it doesn't get adopted, then we'll have a lower budget and a lower thing, and we have what we budgeted for is like what that would look like, assuming we got none of the excess levy appeal. We would go from 4 to 6 fire and EMS staff members. So it would be adding a 5th firefighter and a paramedic, a full-time paramedic per shift. So 3 positions plus 3 positions, 6 overall staffers, right? And that would allow us, that would be what we can, that's the maximum that we can absorb with our current funding. So we'd be there for until
Second backup.
yeah. And so that's the most that we can absorb. And
What do you think the possibility of this going through? We haven't had some great luck with the county and the state.
so this one wouldn't go through the county. So it's not based on political position explicitly, obviously political appointees to some extent. I think that if I were to guess, I think that we would receive a partial excess levy appeal. So, our levy appeal is requesting 2 million, which allows us to go to 10 employees per shift. My guess is that we would probably get half of that. So we would probably get 2 more staff members to go to 8. That's my guess. But we're not overshooting and saying we're not trying to shoot for the moon. This is realistically what we think it takes long-term to anyway do the operations that we're talking about, or midterm. So like,
Ed, can you guys do your job if we don't get those monies that is it gonna pressure you a bit or?
We'll always get the job done.
Well,
But,
to the point
my
of
worry
overstressing
is,
your employees.
my biggest concern is with the increase in run load, with the addition of the ambulance. If we're adding another ambulance that's gonna be responding, we're gonna maintain 1 ambulance that's available in Wabash Township, period, no question about it. So in order to do that, our guys have to run more. So what the biggest concern for me is burnout.
Yeah.
Most of these guys weren't hired with an ambulance being here. They were hired without it. And now we're adding that. So we are incredibly blessed right now to have guys that are here because they want to be here and they're motivated to be here. And we will always get the job done. Just sometimes, I just worry about the guys because they don't take a lot of time off because they don't want to short their shift. They don't, guys coming into work not feeling well because they don't want to leave their shift short. Like, I just don't want to see it get worse. And I believe, just having a transport ambulance alone opens you up to that sort of stuff, right? You guys have more exposure to illness, more sickness, more whatever that be. So I'm worried about it. I'm worried about stretching them too far because it's a very fine line that we're walking, adding more work without increasing salaries to the point that they need to be anyway. So we're just blessed to a point to have guys that are willing to absorb that, knowing that at the end of a year or so, once we've run on the ambulances, our ambulance transports, there might be some ability, some meat on the bone there to try to do something from the revenue generated from them. And these guys are awesome to be able to front load that, willing to say, hey, let's just see what happens. Instead of, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't want to do this. So we'll make it work. I just don't want to stretch them.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of why we, and just internally, part of the conversation that we've had, we do need the second ambulance to be able to go on 2 runs when that happens or other pieces, but we're worried about that, like Ed mentioned. And so our primary piece, if we got 4 to 6 personnel, we still need that second ambulance just because we're already running to stuff already, but we still wouldn't stretch outside. If we didn't get any additional personnel, we still couldn't do what we eventually would like to do, which is be able to respond outside of our service area, to limited area outside of our service area.
Operative word is not what you wanted to, but what you're gonna have to need to do.
Exactly.
Because that's really what we're dealing with here.
Yes.
Absolutely. The need, not the want.
Exactly. And so that's what we're shooting at, right? So this, I think,
This is really, really difficult conversation for me to have when we sat here 3 years ago saying, hey, I just need 1 more guy per shift, right? But what we didn't know 3 years ago was the amount of growth that we were going to experience. We estimated it, we guessed, but you get to a place that we estimated way low and we just had no way of knowing, right? Right now, we've got 3 of our firefighters that are going through paramedic class. So they've got the ability to do that work as a firefighter, an engineer, an officer on a truck, whatever that be, and still be able to provide ALS care. But that comes at a cost, right? $10,000 a head to put people through those programs. It all comes at a cost. And beyond that, it's their time invested in doing it, right? I can't pay them overtime for 800 clinical hours they have to do. They're doing a lot of that on their own. When I say we're blessed to have guys that are willing to take one on the chin a little bit to see what's going to happen. And they're willing to do it, and they're willing to do it for a while. But I just don't want to get to a place where, Dan Huff, the Division Chief Huff and I are both going to be staffing the ambulance working it just to keep that run load down on them. I love working as a paramedic. When I get to work as a paramedic, I can't do it all day, every day, but I love doing it. And so does he. So our ability to jump in there and spread some of that out a little bit is helpful. But But, you know, I've talked about it before. We are in this county, we are the department that gets hit back to back on calls that are stacked often. I'd like the idea, you know, when he first started talking about, you know, what about that second ambulance? Like it was a, don't talk to me about that yet. We got to figure this out. But the reality of it is at some point you have to look at that as meat on the bone that we're leaving hanging. You know what I mean? If we have we need an extra ambulance as a backup truck if our truck goes down for something, right? So the ability to respond to ambulance and be able to build that out, if we've got people that are responding to that call anyway, now from a fire truck, coming off a fire truck, our ability to build that out is still something that's a benefit for the township. And the guys are willing to absorb that. So I think we can do it for a little bit, but it's just going to take a record year of runs. You'd love to think your run load is spread across 3 shifts and it's an even distribution.
It's not always.
It's not. And it's just odd how it works. And some of the guys get rocked pretty hard through the process. So, you know, just talking about Evan Denham. Evan's in medic class right now. He doesn't have an officer on his shift, so he's working as the officer on the shift. He's doing anatomy and physiology, paramedic program. He's got a newborn baby at home. At some point, too much is too much, right? So we have to start figuring out what those things are that we're able to absorb to try to pull some of that off to where his 24 hours here isn't hell the whole time he's here, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to be super cognizant of it because everybody's hiring right now. Lafayette, West Lafayette, Purdue, they're all hiring right now, paying more than we're paying. And they're not asking, Purdue's the only other department asking people to work in an ambulance that's requiring them to be a paramedic. We don't require it. Purdue does. We're up against a lot of difficulty. And like I've always said, sitting in here, we're blessed to have the people we have because they're here because they want to be, not because of the money today. But the more we add to them, at some point that will become a factor. We've just been lucky that it hasn't been so far.
Yeah. And part of what the discussion has been, at least internally here, and just as an FYI, we've been having, I should have probably mentioned that at some point, but I don't think that we have. We've started having conversations with as we've had more staff and whatnot, the union is kind of forming shape a little bit more. And so we're having conversations about formalizing some of the stuff that we already have, and setting a roadmap for the future about that relationship with the township. It's actually been really, really productive and it's been positive, the conversations we've been having. But that's part of what internally we've been talking about, right? So this budget and the estimation for revenue and all of that, don't assume that we're taking additional runs outside of that service area. If we're able to be taking runs outside of our service area, my priority as trustee would be for that increase in revenue, for a substantial portion of it to be utilized to provide raises and whatnot for our existing staff and growing staff. So we've been having some of those conversations about how do we do this in a way that, that again, long-term adds benefit, not just to our residents, but also to our staff too. So just a lot of moving pieces at the same time.
I remember when I started, the idea that that was one of my first things was we need an ambulance, and the idea of having an ambulance with 4 full-time firefighters or something, that was just out of the question. Now we're saying, you know, we're stressed with 1.
Yeah.
And as hard as that is to realize that's happened in such a short amount of time, it's comforting to know that we're dealing with the problem.
Yeah. I think this is what, and I'm not, you know, not to preclude any conversation. I don't want to suggest that there can't be alternative ways to look at the growth and whatnot. But I think that what this budget is, and what this going through this process, excess levy appeals, going for legislation, it's really about trying to plan for the future and not just get slammed by it in the face. Because the township's history has been get slammed by it on the face, and we don't want to keep doing that.
Playing catch up.
Exactly.
Well, the increase has never been what it is now either, and it's only going to go. Yeah, the rate is going to increase as time goes in, but that's the only thing that I don't love is that it's all right away, and I think we'd be needed by like more 2028-ish. But if procedural rules mean that we got to do it this way, then
the other part of that is also the fire marshal position, right?
Yeah.
That the other part of that adds into that because all of that growth and development has got to be policed by somebody. And when Jim isn't doing this anymore, I am it. And it just isn't possible to keep up with it. So,
Yeah, and that's,
yeah, so I just say that to say, when we're adding staff members, that's something else we're asking our firefighters to do as well. We've sent some of them to become inspectors, so they're trying to help with that process as well, to try to spread that out a little bit more.
So Jim is your current fire inspector?
Yes, he's our primary fire inspector.
we've had a couple folks that have gone and done, but again, they're limited because they're responding to calls. Some of them are officers, most of them are officers on shift, et cetera. So you're asking them to do that on top of. So part of the second part, which is smaller but substantial, is the adding a fire marshal position. So it's included on there in the budget. And correct?
And
Did I
is there
say?
any, I'm throwing this out of the blue here, but is there any outside opportunity that, a retired firefighter, still young, would qualify for this, so we're not looking at paying a huge?
Yeah, we've done a lot of talking to surrounding agencies, just trying to see if they had folks initially to try to just work part-time being in inspector force. And it's difficult given what surrounding departments pay their folks to get them to come out here and do it part-time for significantly less than what they do in full-time for. It's just, and I think as the process grows, it's hours worth of work going to do a floor inspection at a new apartment complex. And it just is, I don't believe we're doing the full extent of the job that needs to be done. I think we're doing the best we can with what we have to work with. And I believe that there's more work that should be done, more time investment in that process. We just don't have it. So when we talk about the fire marshal position, it's not just doing fire inspections, it's also doing fire investigations. It's spreading that responsibility of that position out more to be able to cover more stuff. They're not working 40 hours a week just doing inspections, but doing fire investigations, being able to do other administrative tasks, being able to do fire prevention, being responsible for that program and that kind of bureau, if you will. Kind of just, this is some of that professionalizing this organization more than we've ever done before. This is what other organizations do. I just didn't expect it to have to be so quick that we had to do some of these things. So, and not because of this having to do it, we are just finally getting to a place that we're able to step back since we've been back, this is the first time we've really had to be able to step back and take full stock of where we're at, what's going on. And we're seeing things falling off just because we're not able to keep up with it. And we're doing our best. We're all stretched. Especially with the ambulance edition and all that stuff, Dan and I have there's just a ton of extra work and there's just not enough hands to do it.
This one, I have fewer questions about the need for this thing's.
I will note, and this isn't something, just to be very, very clear, this isn't something that either of the fire chief or the EMS chief requested. But if we do get the excess levy appeal, you're obviously going to see a substantial increase in their workload in the fire chief and the EMS chief. I've traditionally done 5% ladders for like how we calculate our numbers. So like an engineer is 5% more pay than a firefighter first class. A lieutenant is 10% more pay than a firefighter first class, like 15, 20, 25, 30. My recommendation, and again, the fun part about the excess levy, if we get that and we're able to add more stuff, I'd like to move the fire chief and the EMS chief up 5% on the rung. So moving the fire chief from 135 to 140. They had been as high when we first got started. The fire chief was at 142 of the position. We just decided to, as we did increases, we focused on the lower end employees. And so it's dropped to 135. So it would be moving it to 140. And the EMS chief, it would be increasing it to be on par with a deputy chief plus the paramedic stipend added on and included in that salary. So, but again, if we don't get the excess levy appeal, the salary resolution would look lower than that. So it's just just presenting.
Let's, I do have more questions about what happens if we don't get it, but let's speed through the rest of this.
Yeah.
Cause we're already,
At an hour. Yeah.
we're an hour in and we're not
I
even
think this is
done.
important.
Oh, no, yeah.
It is. I mean, the
But I don't wanna-
questions are valid.
Oh, no, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I got questions about the process, but I feel like I've got what we were just talking about.
Yeah. Supplies and professional services. Now, this is fairly self-explanatory. As we move to having an ambulance, there's certain expenses that are increasing. Medical supplies, we have traditionally budgeted 15,000, if my memory serves me right. I can pull it up here. And we estimate that with the ambulance service, we would be spending about $50,000 in medications and medical supplies. It's obviously we're billing, so we're collecting that money through the billing process, but it's just increasing that line item for expense. The met bill cost is what we estimate we'll have to pay for the billing service throughout the year. So it's based off of that 6.5% that they bill and also wiggle room because they charge more if, for example, an account goes to collection and they get somebody to pay, then they collect a higher percentage of that than the original number. So because they're added work and whatnot for going through that process. We also will have an increase in fuel because if we're having 2-3 ambulances on the road, that's going to cost us more on fuel. So that's what those bigger increases are, or that are exclusively and specifically about the ambulance expenses. Repairs and maintenance, we've noticed this year, and man, I've been racking my head so hard on this. And we've gone through and looked, and I've looked repeatedly to see are we doing something differently than we should just rein in when it comes to expenses for repair and maintenance because it's being more expensive. And honestly, we can only land at the conclusion that we're experiencing higher wear and tear on our apparatuses from increased run volume. Our apparatuses are also getting a little bit older. Again, goes to highlight why the need for keeping up with our replacement schedule that we've outlined previously. But this year, what is it, 52,000 or something like that we've spent so far. It's
87.
80s.
60 and the 27.5.
Yeah, but the 27.5 is for the facility, and that stayed. We're still good on that side, so we're keeping it flat for that. But on the repair and maintenance for equipment, which is primarily apparatus, that's where we're seeing the biggest piece. We've had
Our ladder right now is getting picked up Wednesday to come back, and Walter's over there said turbo had to be replaced in it, and it was $12,000 just for the turbo. That doesn't count any of the other work they did. 12 grand just for the turbo. So it's a 2013 fire truck, right? I mean, things are going to happen, but we're running the trucks a lot more now than we've ever run them before. So
again, part of the reason and part of and I know that it's all interconnected. But that ties back to our replacement schedule, right? We could always just use it till we burn it out, but we're going to be putting so much money in, and we'd rather spread the love as we add more apparatuses to be able to extend the lifespan of these. But it's just becoming more expensive, and it also assumes the repairs and maintenance line item there also assumes some increase if we get a second ambulance. So like having 2 ambulances, we're going to have costs associated with those ambulances for repair and maintenance. And those are going to run the most miles of any truck, right? Because they're going to be going the furthest. And running at higher speeds throughout the whole day. We separated the uniforms away from the allowance line item. Throughout the time we've been here, we've taken money from used money from the allowances to be able to purchase like gear and stuff for the firefighters.
duty uniforms,
that sort of stuff. And so we've decided to split that off. And so we moved it over to supplies. So you'll see that listed under supplies and the allowances line item reduced. So
we have an expectation we'll spend less next year in that process. We're changing the way our allowance process works. Our uniform allowance for our career staff, they get $1,000 a year for uniforms, things like that. We're changing that process for next year to where it'll be a complete kind of revamp of the process. Right now, what we do is we cut a check in June and December, because how we do those for volunteers and paid staff. Our paid staff will end up being different to where they make their purchases of their uniforms through us. And then that way we're sure that they're getting all the duty uniforms they need. They're all up to spec, what they need to be, that sort of thing. And we think that that'll actually save us quite a bit of money doing it that way. So we're hoping. We're trying something new. We'll see what happens. But
Well, you're in control of quality.
that's right. We're working more as a true quartermaster system is what we're trying to do through that process.
We've also increased training funding with more staff. So we, again, assuming that we go from 4 firefighters to 10, then we would like to double that funding from $20,000 to $40,000 for training. Like Ed mentioned, just on a firefighter paramedic that we put through, that's $10,000 going through that process. So, we also, and this is where the wiggle room is for us to be able to utilize some of the money upfront for COLA adjustments. This budget includes the average ambulance replacement costs in the 1111 budget instead of in the CUME fire budget.
About that and about why it is set, where it's set, if this is a yearly budget.
Yes. So the estimate is,
Bought it for like, what, 380?
yeah, so that is the estimated replacement cost, annual replacement cost if you have 3 ambulances running. That's where that number comes from. Again, we're not there yet, obviously. Part of the challenge and conversation that honestly can continue to be wiggled and worked on as we move forward with billing and adds ambulances is that we deposit the revenue from billing will get deposited into the 1111 fund. So if we wanted to utilize directly the revenue that we're getting from billing to replace those ambulances, it would have to come out eventually out of the 1111 fund. Okay. We do have in any case, and we're trying to be really, really prudent about the debt service plus the 1190 fund to reduce and be able to save up. So we have more wiggle room to pay portions or most of the ambulance from that route. We just left it at the moment as if, in fact, like I have right now I've scheduled all of in the draft debt service schedule and everything that we've been working on internally. We've assumed all of it coming from debt service. Some of it might come from 1190 fund, some of it might come from the 1111 fund. But we want to make sure that we're including that as a line item especially also for the excess levy appeal to demonstrate how much our revenue costs or our replacement cost is from year to year. So,
And when we say 3 ambulances, does that mean that we're talking about buying 2 in the next year?
probably it would be 1 next year and 1 the year after or 28. So 1 in 26, 1 in 27 or 28, depending on
a big overestimate that. Because we're not gonna have it
this year, correct?
for this year.
Yes. And so that is an overestimate. And so that's why I wanted to say that if we want to move COLA to increase COLA, we can do that from there and decrease ambulance.
I would much rather do that.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, it's just a budgetary gimmick at that point.
Yes.
Yes.
To try to like save money for later.
Save money for,
We've already got that, like we're already accounting for that
yes.
properly.
Mhm.
So let's
Yeah.
give it to these award guys.
Yeah. Yeah. No, of course. I'm very happy to do that. Again, we're still in the final, as I mentioned, and if you go to our budget notice, I made sure to include in the note section that the budget notice was higher than even what we anticipate. Even this budget is lower than what we noticed, just because we're trying to work with as much wiggle room with the CPA and the board and the trustee to be able to make these changes, because this is a big budget process. Honestly, probably the most important budget process until 2028, I would guess. So, that makes sense. Capital improvement and debt service specifically. So we have, because of other priorities that we've been working towards, we haven't carried out the Station 1 improvements this year. that we have budgeted for. So we are looking to do probably in the next meeting, a budget reduction for this year to reduce the money that we have allocated for this year for Station 1 improvements to move it to the next year's budget. I mean, we don't even really have to do the reduction, but it's because we have enough money to carry the budget anyway.
Given how much we're growing and changing,
Yeah.
I'd rather meticulously document.
Absolutely. Agreed. That's why I would do the same thing there. And so the numbers that you see in the third set of these is a financial statement / proposed tax rate, and it goes through and estimates operating balances and all of that. Just only a note that the debt service is wrong because they're served the way that the Department of Local Government Finance has calculated the impact of circuit breaker losses. Traditionally, it hasn't affected debt service funds, but under SB1 it does. And their calculations on the website don't account for that. So what prints out is slightly higher than what our actual expected balance at the end of 26 is for the debt service fund. So that's that's just a note. It's nothing.
Yeah.
The department calculates that number anyway, so it's just as an FYI. So we shifted that to last year to next year. We are keeping the normal annual turnout gear expenses on there. And so we budgeted for that. We've reduced how much our overall general replacement that we anticipate for next year is. And so the total budget for the Hume Fire Fund is $295 versus this year it was $385. And so what we're doing there is we're not having purchases of radio equipment from that fund because we're debt servicing it instead. And we're also trying to reduce how much we get on specific, plus a lot of the stuff that we would need to buy, we purchased in the last few years. So, and going forward, it's more stuff that will get incorporated into the purchases of apparatuses themselves. There's still going to be every year expenses. We don't have an anticipated vehicle replacement next year, like small vehicle, like a Tahoe or whatnot. So we don't have money coming out for that. So that's part of what's a little bit lower. So we anticipate to save $200,000 to $250,000, essentially increase that surplus for following years by that amount. My estimate is that we need from now to 2032, 33, we need to have about 1.5 million saved over the course of those years just for the debt service planning and down payments and whatnot for stuff. Now, the big change is that we would be debt servicing a lot of our capital expenses. These are some of the expenses that we had went and spoken with the county, et cetera, saying, hey, we need to be able to do this. We'd like to do this through using local income tax revenue. Obviously, that hasn't happened. This would include that 992,000 would include the radio equipment, but it's a reduced cost of the radio equipment. I'll let Ed talk a little bit more about that, but we had previously estimated needing 30, 35 radios. We'd be going down to only purchasing 20 portables. We had estimated that we would need to replace all of the mobile radios for the apparatuses. Some of them have since become backwards compatible. Some we've already had to replace since we originally made that. So some of those expenses have been accounted for, but especially on the portable, I'll let you talk a little bit more about what that would mean.
So historically, each firefighter has been issued a radio because our volunteers respond from home to calls. Our kind of makeup has changed a little bit since we've added career staff. We don't have as many home responses. We have a lot more. Right now, our volunteer staff is primarily made up of people that come here and will take a shift. They'll be here 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever that be. We have very, very few, I would say less than 5 volunteers that would respond from home to calls. So with that, we just don't see with the other technology we have in alerting people through Active 911, through, we've got other methods that we alert folks through, that needing to put a $6,000 on the hip of every firefighter $6,000 radio just isn't, it's just not a good use of money.
Especially when
So-
we're increasing our number of volunteers.
That's exactly right. So the goal would be to just have all the career staff would have a radio issued to them. For our volunteers and part-time folks, like our volunteer or our part-time ambulance people, we have radios right now that are dedicated for the ambulance to stay in our EMS supply room. When those part-timers come in, they grab one of those radios. It's no different than what Tees does. When you go to work at Tees, you take the person who you're replacing their radio, grab a new battery, slap in it, and you go to work. That will just end up with a bank of about 12 radios. That'll be kind of our jump radios, our pool radios, that when volunteers come in, they just grab one of those radios, put it in a radio strap, and they're ready to go to work. So it's going to save us quite a bit doing that over purchasing a radio for everybody. It used to make sense when guys were going from their houses to calls. We're just not doing that like we used to do that. So it's going to save us quite a bit. And our mobile radios, as we purchase new trucks, I've tried to incorporate new radios into those to try to cut down on the overall number. Originally, we were at 9 or 10 mobiles that we needed to purchase. Right now, we've looked at most everything we have, and 4 radios will do us mobile wise. That will make us, once they do the upgrade to the radio system, we'll be fine. So it's going to save us quite a bit of money doing it that way. And I've been, good or bad, I've had to replace radios over the last couple of years anyway, portable radios, as we've had some that have gotten old and broken that we can't replace parts for anymore. I mean, we've got some radios that have been in service over 20 years and their life expectancy is 8 to 10. So we're milking them as long as we can. And the advantage is once we do these radios, the other ones will continue working until they don't. So we'll be okay for quite a while. So good mission.
And I would add that I think there's been comments online from some of the viewers. There is a grant out there that's expected to open at some point for this purpose. We just can't, grants are highly competitive. We don't know if we would get them. We can't bank on a grant.
Well, we've been funding the radios for 3 years.
You bet.
Yeah. And so that we could still go for a grant and try to increase our number of jump radios, or be able to have to give to some of the volunteers that are more active, et cetera. But this is essentially bare boning not bare boning we'll still be able to make it work, but
yeah,
reducing how much we're buying so that we can maximize what we get the money for.
Yeah.
Air packs wise, we got a quote for, and this includes that price of the quote for getting the 20 SCBAs and the 62 bottles for our staff and whatnot. We are part of this, might be a little bit cheaper at the end of the process, because we're waiting to hear about pooling a purchase with our neighboring departments, which we're hoping would reduce the cost of per unit essentially. So that Ed's been working on that. So that's part of what we're doing.
And is this, when we see this 650 in debt service, is this included in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's debt service on the ambulance, on this, and on
Radios and yeah.
this radio you're apparently having.
Yes. So the other two things that are included on here. So the ambulance number 2, it's going to be a lower price than first front running ambulance when it comes to chassis, everything else. It would be actually it's going to be more expensive just because we just got a quote and the power load cost has increased 30% since last year. But then when we got the ambulance, some of that medical equipment we already had that we were using on the truck. But as we move to getting an ambulance, if we move it to a second ambulance, we would need to purchase medical equipment for that as well.
With the current ambulance, we didn't have to purchase a Lucas device, a CPR mechanical device, or a cardiac monitor. We already had those. So we didn't have to add that to the cost of the ambulance. With the new truck, we will have to add those things as new equipment for them. So that's where it's coming from. Those are the big ticket things. Just the power load cot, the electric cot, and the system that comes in it was $64,000 when we bought the last. We just got a quote for $80,000 for the system for a new truck. So your choices are crap, right? There just isn't. There is another option, but it's needed.
Yeah.
But goodness gracious.
The other part attached to that, and most likely that other Lucas device would right now go on our pickup truck. then eventually it would transition to our third ambulance not needing to have that device purchased at that moment, right? So, and a refurbished monitor, that's one of those things that, again, we're trying to save some money. And so if we're spreading the usage of some of those devices, we feel that we can save some money on a refurbished monitor and make it last and be as judicious as we can with our taxpayer dollars there. So those are the pieces that would be included in that. I think I mentioned, but I didn't say it there. It would be our target would be to have a 2-year debt on this. So essentially we would set a 2-year loan where we pay it over 2 years, this 992. I guess I didn't mention, but I should have. The other part that's in there is the existing debt for engine 606. So that continues.
That was what I was thinking. All right. Do we have any revenue data coming back from the ambulance yet?
We starting to trickle in. We don't have the full numbers. Just I can tell you how much we have billed out, but it takes time for. It's a lagging indicator for money coming in.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how much revenue one of these guys brings in a year.
The estimate from Medville is that it'll bring in, with our estimated run volume, is a conservative estimate is 660. Really, it's probably closer to 700. Again, that's assuming the ambulance is up and running 24/7.
Okay, and I was going to say, if we're bringing in a second ambulance, are we net increase? Are you truly using it as a backup, or is it a backup but also it's a second ambulance?
Yes.
And we're getting it's not a 1X. We're getting something.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
So I can tell you they gave Medville sent us a report after our first 30 days of the truck being in service. And that was BLS only, and only running about 30% of the time. And we billed out $46,000 is what was billed out in 30 days. That's incredible. That was,
And we were planning to go to ALS when? Soon?
I actually just got confirmation today that it'll all be completed by the end of the week. Awesome. They've got all the paperwork. That I talked to the rep right before I came in here, and she said it'll all be completed by the end of the week.
Okay.
So
that makes me a lot less worried about anything else.
So only that I was super surprised knowing it was only up for 30 days, and 30% of the time is being liberal, just because it was only up during the day when we were here. We took it out of service in the evening because we didn't have enough staff, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So billing out $46,000 in 30 days was holy crap. I didn't expect that. So once the truck's up more and once we're billing ALS, that'll be significant. So
that's part of it. And again, to tie that in, that more than 1X, part of that, we also want to tie, it's not tie, that's not the right word, but as that revenue increases, we recognize especially that we are going to be requiring more of our staff. So that's why I mentioned at the beginning that I would like us to work towards tying a percentage of that increase in revenue to, and it doesn't have to be tied necessarily here's the dollars and cents exactly, but I want us to plan for using some of that additional revenue that's going to be consistent, overall over the long term, say 30% of that extra revenue or whatnot towards raises and stuff like that.
Yeah, we can talk about that. I think there's a couple points to that.
I think it gives them something to work for.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying they don't have.
No, I love those kinds of incentive.
I love it.
Structures. So I think that's fine.
And what would be the time frame for if you once we go to the second ambulance and getting the chassis and everything working?
So what would probably happen with our second ambulance, if we were getting one through this process, we would probably, we won't get as big of a truck as we've got now. It'll be a F450 chassis, probably a pickup chassis. And right now, because there was such a backlog, there's a bunch of demo trucks that are available today, sort of thing. So we could get them pretty quick. I checked turnaround time on power loads. Those are things that generally the power load and the cot are things that's got a longer lead time. Right now, turnaround time on those are 12 to 18 weeks is what they said. So, it could happen pretty quickly. I believe that our replacement for the current ambulance, that'll be a truck we probably spec out and have built for our needs. But a second truck right now doesn't have to be something that crazy.
So be within a year.
Yeah, yes, we have the ability to have an ambulance here stocked, ready to go probably by the end of the year. By the end of the year or, I don't think that's unrealistic at all. I think it could be faster than that, but I think through this process, we learned a lot getting the truck the way we got the truck. There's just been little things that we would do different next time, and I think that will be our order truck when we order and spec a truck the way we want it. But this next truck, it just has to be something that's got the size ability to take we put fire equipment in it, we put our fire gear and stuff like that. It's got to have space for that. So a small truck like T's would get is just not necessarily what works for us, but we've got the ability to get something pretty quickly, and there's a lot of demos that are out and available. We just have to be flexible for this process, and that's just not kind of been the mantra up to this point with a lot of things that the department has done, just because the department has been a lot of things have been kind of way over-spec'd. We just have to be flexible.
Sure.
So,
one last note, because I forgot to mention this. Our revenue estimate for the 660 that we are using for this calculation is actually an underestimate, in part because it's based off of us responding and taking patients, assuming that every patient goes to the Parkway facility, because we would receive less in billing, because part of what that billing entails is mileage. And since we would be reducing the mileage substantially, I've chosen to assume that as our number for sustained long-term planning, because I don't think that it's fair to say we're always going to be driving and billing 11 miles roughly.
No,
when
there's like 2 hospitals that are.
When there's going to be
right now, yeah.
Exactly. So I didn't think you guys would have thought of that, but I just wanted to reassure you that that's part of what we've assumed in these calculations for revenue and whatnot. So
I'd say it's way low. You cut out the mileage, but it also makes.
I would rather it be way low. Way low's where I want to estimate.
But it makes your turnaround time faster. That gives you the ability to take more runs that way.
Yeah.
So,
and then the only budgetary oddness of this part that I need to bear in mind is just that we've moved all of this from Team Fire to debt service.
Yep.
Yes. Because this is a weird year.
well, it's a weird year, and we're going to slowly be moving that direction anyway. And part of it's actually really funky. I'll do a 30-second spiel. Part of what I'm trying to do is to keep our debt service rate throughout this entire 10-year period below 10 cents, below 10 cents per $100 of assessed value. Why that number? Because SB1 set lower thresholds before something has to go to a referendum or be a controlled project. So right now, controlled projects are based off of, if you have 5%, 5 cents or more on debt, then that's considered a controlled project. A controlled project is subject to the possibility of a remonstrance, etc. If you go to 10 cents, then you're talking, you have to do it in an election year, a midterm or a presidential election year, and the general election, you have to go and sell that to the constituents. It's much lower threshold for townships, which is ridiculous because our projects are just as expensive and our apparatuses are just as expensive. But it's just what the legislature set. So part of what this whole plan is saving up money in the Cume Fire Fund to be able to
Make larger purchases.
make larger purchases smaller so that we are able to stay under that threshold. So that's part of what we're just planning with these numbers. And so we're saving more to be able to put higher down payments at the moments when that debt service rate would be higher. So I know, a lot of information.
Yeah.
Any other questions? That's kind of.
I think my only questions were really procedural about like
What happens
so there's
next?
a whole separate version of this bad boy if we don't get it
Yes.
that I do want to see as well.
Yes.
Um,
So-
and what is the problem? Like, are we pre-passing 2 of them, or do we just have to know that the other one exists? So that if they come back with a no, we have to do like an emergency session to quickly pass an amended budget? Like, what's the quicker process?
So the process would be just a quick overview. Let's say if it gets adopted the same way, easy enough to understand. If it gets reduced as part of their 1782 process, I know that you get those notices at year's end. I've got you as a recipient, as the board president. you'll get the notice that shows how much your approved budget was and how much your approved levy would be. So our approved levy would be our max levy anyway. So that's gonna be what it is. But our budget would get approved probably much higher than we would want it to be, because it would assume they would accept it, basically dropping our 2026 year-end balance to zero. Obviously, that's not how we would operate if we did that. So what we would do then would be, we would go back and do a budget reduction and essentially pass a different budget, and it would be the same structure, obviously, but it would be the numbers that reflect our actual
And would
revenue.
this all get cleared up before the end of the year?
It should, my understanding is that this.
I mean, I would hope so.
Yes.
I'm like, I need you to take away the question mark at the end of that and make it an exclamation. Yeah.
I've been let down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I would hope is that we would know by the end of December 16. And what I would envision would be that we would pass a salary ordinance, assuming all of these costs are at this level. And we would then essentially, what we would need to do, the more substantial part, not that, we would know that if we don't get approved for that, we can't hire that many people, but we would pass a budget resolution based on the salary resolution, based on the budget that we're adopting. And then we would reduce that salary resolution, the number of staff members. In that same vein, if you guys are comfortable with it, like I mentioned, the EMS and the fire chief position would have a higher rate than we would finally have at the end of the year. So we would be able to then decrease it to the current structure of pay if we needed to. But we can plan for the higher structure of pay.
So we're gonna pass everything and then we might need to come back and amend.
Yeah.
Literally everything.
Okay. That's what I thought. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Yes, any questions?
I know, very
Everyone
technical.
looks tired.
Last thing on this, this year, we are expecting a higher circuit breaker loss than we will the following years. The total estimated that we think is probably in the range of a circuit breaker loss of $200,000, which is already assumed in this. Most of it, most of 250, I think. Most of it is, 210. Most of it is coming from a 1-year thing where people are getting $300 off of their property taxes for 1 year before they restructure the deduction structure for net assessed value and whatnot. So this year, units that are fast growing like ours are actually going to get hit harder, while following years the damage will be less, is our anticipation of what the numbers are shaking out to be. So we anticipate having a higher circuit breaker loss. This budget accounts for that and has this one has an estimated circuit breaker loss of, give me 1 second. Assuming that we spent everything, including the ambulance replacement, again, the wiggle room there. With the ambulance, assuming we spent the full $216,000 that we budgeted for the ambulance replacement, we would have a net decrease of $135,000, assuming we hired everybody on January 1st. Probably not realistic. Yeah. So and actually when I did the calculation, assuming we hired them March 1st to start, that would wipe out that entire loss. But just to keep you apprised that those are pieces of that. And again, assuming that we did spend $200,000 to replace ambulances out of the firefighting fund.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's just the state pushing money around and forcing us to take on more debt. Cuba.
Yeah. Stupid.
Above my pay grade.
Sure looks pretty though, doesn't it?
All right. Any other questions, guys?
I know it's a lot, guys, and I appreciate it very much.
Good.
We're doing our best, I promise.
Yeah.
With what we
No,
got.
this is a lot of work. This is a lot of work.
That's never under.
Yeah.
We've never.
And this was tightly put together, so I appreciate that.
I know that it's a lot of information, and I do want to thank you guys for taking the time and reviewing it and asking these important questions, because man, it's been so much work to do this balancing the changes of SB1 with our growth, with expiring provisions as a result of SB1, with working with the CPA, going through all of these processes. It's a lot, but we're committed to working for our community. And so I know it's a
see
lot.
the section there about the board. paying.
Oh, yeah. So I did, good, but, no, but, no, I know you're joking, but just a quick note there. It reflects an increase of $250 per year per board member. So that is $3,500 per year per board member is what I budgeted.
What is it?
It's from 325 to, from 3,250 to 3,500.
All right, motion to close the public hearing.
Their opportunity for public comment on the subject of the budget.
Comment from-
He wants to go.
No comment.
Motion to close. Second. The public hearing. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next meeting is October 21st. That is the date that we have to pass this thing, so everybody be here, please. Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you next time.
December
That polo
16th,
shirt you
just a heads up. I will be in
polo
the
shirt
paper
you wear.
on the
Actually
conference.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Next you are.
Seven.
Okay.
Mine.
That's okay. That's fine.
I was
Hopefully we'll
just
have
amazed
possibly a light agenda.
when I saw the.
End of the year.
For the next board meeting, there will be a couple of things that
Had two
will,
funerals.
oh,
Take
yeah.
a meeting around.
I can hang up there.
I'm never on contact.
Yeah.
I said, for when I
I was
stopped.
really struggling, man.
And.
I'm sorry.
No, it's got my ears, like, I'm waggling up
I
there.
said, you should see some